trying to reverse. He has committed himself. Many former attorney generals go and just say, I've done the top of my field. I can just make money and relax. Eric Holder has not done that. He's continued to fight to maintain voting rights and to maintain the things that he has stood for as a civil rights lawyer way before he became the Attorney General of the United States. He has shown consistency, and he has shown a statesman-like view of citizens' rights. We wanted him here to share with us his thoughts on what we as a civil rights body ought to be doing now to preserve and maintain the right to vote. The former Attorney General of the United States of America, the Honorable Eric Holder.
When I wake up in the morning and the sunlight hurts my eyes.
Good morning, National Action Network. What's happening? It's good to be back in New York, Queens, East Elmhurst, 11369. There we go. It's a pleasure and an honor to be back here with the warriors of the National Action Network, and that means women warriors, and all of its partners who are here this morning. And it's also especially good to be here with my good friend, my mentor, my teacher, my instructor, my director, the guy who ran the Justice Department, Al Sharpton. This nation owes much to the work of the people who are gathered here today, and I'm confident that a better America will be created by the work that you all will continue to do. Now, I am honored to count Reverend Sharpton and the National Action Network as allies, and really, more importantly, as friends in the important work of attaining justice and equal rights for all. Now, there is in the United States today a crisis of leadership, caused and perpetuated by an administration that uses fear to stoke division, race and ethnicity to polarize the country, and lies to support broken policies. You know, Kellyanne Conway talks about alternative facts. Where I grew up in Queens, we call those lies, you know? Now, it would be easy for Americans to grow pessimistic, I think, to give up. But as I've traveled to over 25 states in the past year, I've found that people of this country are better, they're more caring, and they're not like those small-minded leaders who are now in power. The civic reawakening that we have seen in this country that began in January of 2017 can't just be a moment. It has to become a sustained movement so that we reclaim the country and reshape the future of this nation. Now, it seems I'm the only one here today who's not running for president in 2020. But I want to assure you that I, along with a young man from Chicago with some rather large ears, the 44th President of the United States, that he and I will continue to fight for the future of our country through the National Democratic Redistricting Committee and all of its affiliates. You know, for too long, Democrats and progressives have lost sight of the state and local races that shape the day-to-day lives of the people that we serve. Just yesterday in Wisconsin, we look like we're headed to a recount in a Wisconsin Supreme Court race that we should have won. Now, understandably, much of the attention at this convention and over the course of the next few months is going to be focused on the next presidential race. But with state legislatures set to begin drawing new voting districts in 2021, what happens in those races over the next 2 years will shape the next decades of our politics. So if you care about voting rights, if you care about health care, if you care about criminal justice reform, if you care about a woman's right to choose, you should know that in the state legislatures the most consequential decisions facing those areas, that's where those decisions are made. So, no, my fight to end gerrymandering is about electing leaders who actually work for the interests of the people that they are supposed to represent. I'm going to do everything that I can to ensure that the next Democratic president is not hobbled, as President Obama too frequently was, by a House of Representatives that is pulled to the extremes by members of gerrymandered districts. We need to make the Freedom Caucus a thing of the past. And I will try to make certain that state legislatures are composed of people who pass laws that serve the people and not the special interest. Now, a primary question for the people of the National Action Network is who among the great candidates that you're going to see will you support in the coming months? Well, first, let me say something really clearly. And I hope this is obvious to you all, as I am sure it's going to become obvious to the people of this country. Whoever becomes the Democratic nominee will be better than the present occupant of the White House. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Second, whoever becomes the Democratic nominee must have all of our support, and we must all work to ensure that that person is elected. I don't want to hear any complaints about my guy didn't win, my woman didn't win. This we have to do. Get behind the Democratic nominee. This is an existential election, and the fate of this nation hinges on the result. The nominee must have the full and enthusiastic support from all of us. Third, now there are going to be calls for a civil dialogue. I was criticized an awful lot. You know, maybe I was a little too loud, a little too frank, a little too direct. I'm from New York, you know. But they want a civil dialogue, and that's a good thing. You know, civility has its place. But we must never let it be valued at the expense of truth or principle. Those who seek the presidency must be prepared to speak that truth to power. We must be prepared to fight for our values. So now the question is, who should that Democratic president be? Well, with the depth and diversity of the current field, and with those who may still join, I think we have a whole bunch of really good options. I believe we should choose our nominee based on at least some of the following criteria. And these are questions I think you need to ask yourself. Does the person have a clear vision for the nation that meets the challenges of today as well as the uncertainties of the future? Is this a candidate of integrity whose honesty will help rebuild trust in our institutions? Now, oh, okay. The power of my oratory. I hope I don't knock anything else down with my voice here, you know. Is this a candidate of integrity whose honesty will help rebuild trust in our institutions? Now, that's in contrast to the present administration. Now, in that regard, all of our candidates pass that test. They've got the necessary integrity. The other side, they don't know what integrity is. Does the person have the capacity, both mental and physical, to handle the rigors of the Oval Office? Does the candidate have the experience to revitalize a federal government that has been mismanaged at home and diminished abroad? Will this person have the ability to inspire the American people and bring us together? Now, in evaluating potential nominees, we should remember, listen to this now, creativity is not limited to the young, nor wisdom to those who are older. We must measure our candidates by not by their age, but by the vitality of their ideas. Now, this moment also, I think, calls for transformative policies. Now is a time to think big and to go big, but be wary of purists. Now is not a time for ideological litmus tests. The difference between the so-called moderates and the so-called progressives in the Democratic Party are truly not that substantial on the issues that matter the most to the American people. We can't fight amongst ourselves once a nominee is picked. Now, let me just move a little bit. I believe that the candidates must focus on at least a few critical areas. First, inspired by our history as the party of Franklin D. Roosevelt, Democrats must restructure our economy in a way that promises economic security for the middle class, creates genuine opportunities for upward mobility, and attacks the income inequality of this new Gilded Age. And we can't have a better economy for working people without a health care system that simply guarantees universal coverage. And we should also not be hesitant to state an obvious truth. The white working class has more in common with black and brown workers than it does with the moneyed class that now runs the government and puts policies in place that benefit the rich few and not the many who are still trying to find their way in this great nation. We need to build an alliance. Second, we are running out of time to deal with the existential threat of climate change. It is a moral imperative that we mitigate the damage that is already happening, take wide-ranging steps to reduce carbon emissions, and commit to being a net zero carbon emitter with 10 years. But we also have to focus on issues of environmental justice that afflict communities of color. Now, this is often the neglected part of the environmental agenda. What kind of world do we want to leave to our children and to our grandchildren and to those folks in communities of color? Third, the next president must fight for comprehensive, humane immigration reform that outlines a pathway to citizenship and recognizes that we are strengthened by our diversity. Fourth, the recent First Step Act was just that, a first step. It must be followed by much more sweeping criminal justice reforms that end the costly and illogical tough-on-crime laws that have swelled our prison ranks but have not done enough to keep our communities safe or intact. The efforts of the Obama administration in this area must be reclaimed, and then they must be built upon. In this country, too many people go to too many jails for far too long for no good law enforcement reason. Fifth, our next president should prioritize the healing of the nation and not be hesitant in identifying all forms of bias and discrimination, nor be meek in seeking their elimination. Americans must recognize each other as partners and not adversaries. And our next leader must be conversant with the concerns of people of color and must be genuine in dealing with those concerns. It is not enough for any candidate or for any party to come to this gathering only in those years when there's a primary season, or only to show up to a black church the Sunday before a Tuesday election seeking support. Commitment to the cause is measured by what a person does, what a party does when an electoral outcome is not at stake. Lastly, we must restore the core of our democracy and protect voting rights. There is nothing more fundamental to the well-being of our nation than the right to cast a ballot in fair elections and free from foreign interference. The right to vote is the most fundamental of rights. It is not a privilege. The Republican Party has used voter ID laws, gerrymandering, and the purging of voter rolls to undermine that right while doing absolutely nothing to protect our electoral system from another foreign attack. So we have to reconstruct the Voting Rights Act to ensure that every American has a full and equal say in our democracy. This is the defining issue, the defining civil rights issue of our time. Now, I know there are going to be disagreements during the primary season, but Democrats and all of you here at the National Action Network, I think, should heed the words that President John F. Kennedy was tragically prevented from delivering on November the 22nd, 1963, the day that he died, in a speech that he was never able to give. Let me just quote him. "Our duty as a party is not to our party alone, but to the nation, and indeed to all mankind. Let us not be petty when our cause is so great. Let us not quarrel amongst ourselves when our nation's future is at stake. The party and all of you should never lose sight of our primary objective, making sure that a Democratic president is sworn in on January the 20th, 2021. That is the bottom line. It is time to end this era of division, malfeasance, incompetence, and corruption. Now, I stand here today feeling and knowing that our country has come a long way in the 400 years since the first Africans were brought to this land as slaves in 1619. But I also stand here clear-eyed about the challenges that this great nation continues to face. There is much more that we must do to achieve true justice and equality in this nation. Today, more than ever, we need to lift each other up and empower one another to make our country a better place. We must all do our part to help make certain that this nation becomes true again once to our founding documents and makes real the promise of America for all of its people. I look forward to working with all of you in this great endeavor and to building a brighter American tomorrow. We can do this. Thank you very much.
Eric Holder.